In part 2 of chapter 11, we'll try to define risk. We'll talk about different types of categories of risk. And then we will also talk about different risk tolerance or perceptions that the different project managers have in the context of project management. A dictionary definition of risk is the possibility of loss or injury. There's a negative connotation attached to the term risk, and this is how most people understand the term risk. They understand it as something negative, as some sort of a problem. Indeed, negative risk involves understanding potential problems, meaning something negative, that might occur in the project and how they might impede project success. Negative risk management is like a form of insurance. In other words, you're thinking about various future problems and you're trying to invest money into preventing those, invest money or time or other resources into preventing those future problems from occurring. So in a way, negative risk management is like an investment into the future, something that will help you in the future. But risk does not have to be negative. Risk can also be positive. Positive risks are risks that result in good things happening, sometimes called opportunities. So an opportunity is a form of a positive risk, meaning something unpredictable happens in the future, and this unpredictable thing does not create problems. In fact, it gives you more opportunities. An example of a positive risk would be, let's say, obtaining additional funding, something that you didn't expect at the beginning of the project. Let's say, while working on a project, you get awarded a particular grant from the government that expands your opportunities, expands your resources, and you didn't really count on that. So now you're in a better position to complete the project within the specified budget and timeline. Now, combining those two perspectives of positive and negative risk, we can come up with a general definition of project risk. And we can define it as an uncertainty that can have a negative or positive effect on meeting project objectives. So the goal of project risk management is to minimize potential negative risks while also maximizing your exposure to potentially positive risks that can happen throughout the duration of the project. Now, some organizations make the mistake of only addressing tactical and negative risks when performing project risk management. So the scope of risk management needs to be expanded. It needs to be broad enough to encompass both strategic risks and upside opportunities, which some authors refer to as integrated risk management, looking at risk as a whole, looking at both positive and negative opportunities arising from uncertainty. Now, different managers have different risk utility or risk tolerance. To make it simple, we can say that they have different attitudes towards risk. They have different levels of acceptance of risk. So we can explain that first of all by providing some concepts and then looking at visualizations of those concepts. So the first concept is risk utility or risk tolerance. It's the amount of satisfaction or pleasure received from a potential payoff. Now, people are different, and I think most people are risk averse. In other words, they don't like risk, they don't like uncertainty, even if this uncertainty can have an upside. Okay, but there is, I think, a smaller percentage of the population who are similar to gamblers, although I'm not sure whether it's the right term for that. Gamblers, they derive pleasure from risk. They like to take chances. It gives them pleasure. It gives them some satisfaction. So I'm not sure about the exact breakdown, but I would say that most people are risk averse. I know there is research on behavioral economics by a Nobel Prize winning economist. I think his last name is Karahana. Maybe I'm wrong about the last name, but there's a famous book. It's called Thinking Fast and Slow, something like that. So in this book, he talks about his research, and it looks like most people are risk averse indeed. Now, for those people who are risk averse, utility rises at a decreasing rate. In other words, they don't appreciate increasing risk. They value increasing. If the risk becomes higher, even if the payoffs become higher, they don't like that. They value those payoffs less. Now, on the other side of the spectrum, those people, those managers who are risk-seeking, have a higher tolerance for risk, and their satisfaction increases when more payoff is at stake. Now, the goal is to be somewhere in the middle. The goal of a project manager is to be somewhere in the middle between these two extremes. Warren Buffett explains this position as follows. He basically says that in order to be a successful investor, you don't need to be very smart. You don't need to have a PhD in finance. He says it's something that is more of a character trait, being a successful investor. And this character trait is basically remaining sober in the times of extreme optimism and extreme pessimism. If you look at Warren Buffett's teaching in relation to investment, then his main message is fairly simple. To be successful in investments, you need to buy from people who are overly pessimistic, who are very scared. They think that the entire economy will collapse. And if they think about the prospects that way, then you can buy stock from them at a very low price. So you buy from those who sell low, and then you sell stock at the time of extreme optimism, when people get so excited about the future of a particular company or industry. They think that it will be growing exponentially forever. So that's the time to sell, right? But most people get it wrong. What happens is that most amateur investors, they get into the stock market when it's at its peak. When it's at its peak, it's too late to get into the market, right? You need to wait until it declines to buy stock at a good price. So that's what it means to be risk neutral, not getting too optimistic and at the same time not getting too optimistic about future possibilities. Now, visually, visually those ideas can be depicted as follows. So you see, risk-averse people, they don't value risk that much, even if potential payoff is growing. In other words, if the risk is increasing while potential payoff from accepting this risk is also increasing, people are becoming less and less accepting of that. And it will get to the point where if they think that the risk is too large, then they don't care anymore about the payoff. They just want to minimize the downside. And I would say that most people are like that. They're risk averse. Now, there are people who are risk seeking. In other words, as risk increases and potential payoffs increase proportionally, they actually like that situation. They like to gamble. They want to play the game and see whether they can win big. So your goal as a project manager is to be somewhere in between. In other words, not to get too excited about future possibilities, because if you get too excited, you will ignore the risk. But at the same time, not being completely risk averse, because if you're not taking chances, right? If you're completely risk averse, then the downside of that is that you're also not exposing yourself to positive opportunities to win big, to accomplish something with the help of luck, right? Now, again, going back to what I think is a very fundamental book on risk, it's called Fooled by Randomness by Nassim Taleb. He suggests the following strategy. Basically, he says that most people are risk averse, and they should be risk averse because we're not gamblers. We all have bills to pay. We have families to support. So we cannot gamble with our money, with our careers easily, right? Because the downside of risk is becoming somewhat problematic for a lot of people, as they get older, as they get more established. But at the same time, he says you cannot be completely risk averse. You need to take chances. So he gives advice mostly for investments, for portfolio managers. So basically what he says that most of your money, let's say 80%, needs to be invested into safe instruments, safe stock, something along the lines of Coca-Cola. According to Warren Buffett, Coca-Cola will be around for the next 100 years because it's so much engraved into people's culture. They think that Coca-Cola means happiness. Any celebration should involve purchase of Coca-Cola. So most of your money should be invested in those safe, well-established companies that are very likely to have steady, maybe not spectacular, but steady growth. But he says then 20% of your money should be invested into highly risky companies, highly risky projects. So it should be like your gambling amount. 20% of your money should be your gambling amount. So gamble by investing into very uncertain industries, very uncertain companies that nevertheless may have a very bright future. Something along the lines of Elon Musk companies, maybe Tesla, or I forgot the name, that StarX, or that space transportation companies that launches rockets. Something along those lines. Most likely you will lose money, but if you win, if one of those companies, one of those industries takes off, you can win big. So Nassim Taleb, he suggests splitting your budget into like a stable investment with most of your money devoted to it, and then also creating a gambling fund, something that you can afford to lose, right? And that should not be a major part of your investment. It should be like 10 or 20%, something like that. Well, how does it translate to project management? How does this translate to management in general? Well, the same thing. As an organization, most of your money, most of your budget should be invested into stable, high certainty projects that are very likely to improve your performance, although they're not likely to make you win big, to make you a big winner. But nevertheless, no company can afford to be completely risk averse. Nowadays, there's an increasing belief among managers that innovation is the only way to go. In other words, this is how you become successful as a company, through innovation, not through mundane daily operations, right? You need to innovate. Now, if you innovate, if you become a pioneer in something, then by definition you're facing a lot of risks, but you cannot exclude that. So some of your budget as a company should be devoted to those high risk, high return projects as well. But probably most of the funds of your organization should be devoted to projects with moderate risk, something that is likely to work out. But the downside of projects that are certain is that they're not likely generate huge payoffs, something that will make you win as an organization big time.